Kasriel, and earlier this year, late last year, we had this integration of Elance and Otis to become the world's largest platform for work, and very few industries out there are as integrated on a platform as work is, and Stephane will take us through a few of his insights on that. Thank you, Stephane.
I think, can people hear me? Is this working? Yeah? Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. So what's the 8 p.m., 5 hours of presentation. This is the MIT magic, you know, like five hours of super intense, and people are still intense, so that's great. Who here has heard of Elance or Odesk before or used it? Okay, so I'm going to go through a little bit of stuff that hopefully people don't know, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the evolution of the platform. Let me get just started. And that screen doesn't work, right? So just, you know, the highlight of what we do, right? We are a global marketplace for online work, and what that means for people who haven't used the site before, typically there's two types of stakeholders. It's a two-sided marketplace. One side is freelancers, so people who have skills and usually a little bit of extra time. Either they're working full-time on the platform or they're working part-time. You know, a lot of them are students and all that stuff. And on the other side of the marketplace are clients. And these tend to be businesses, although people also use it for personal purposes, and businesses of all sizes. You know, we have a lot of very small, you know, incubated startups that don't have a ton of money and need a few part-time developers to work with them. But we also have extremely large companies, you know, that are using the platform. I think today we have a company that is that has a little bit over 5,000 people full-time on the platform, and we have quite a few that have hundreds or a few thousand. And I don't know if we're going to get slides, but the bottom line is the way it works is, you know, as a client, you would post your job. As a freelancer, you would show your profile. Then we have a lot of, you know, pretty complex data science involved to try to match the best possible freelancer with the best possible job. You know, the goal is to keep everybody as busy as possible. As Eileen was saying earlier today, in the world of abundance, filtering is the key value. So we have about 10,000 freelancers who sign up every day. We don't have jobs for 10,000 people every day, sadly. But we do need to start new people every day because the platform is growing, and we can't just, you know, once everybody's at 100% capacity, you need to bring in new people on the platform. So we have interesting challenges there as it relates to matching people. And then once the match is made, we handle everything from contracting to compliance, taxation, payments, you know, all sorts of things that may not be super exciting to our clients or our freelancers, but they're required in most countries to operate as a business. So that's what we do as a marketplace. To give you some numbers, today we have about 2.5 million active clients on the platform. I think we're close to 10 million freelancers now. We're doing almost $1 billion of transactions this year, so that's not revenue to the company. The company takes about 10%, so we're a $100 million company. We operate in 180 countries, which is pretty much every country where you can legally operate in doing the things we do. You know, 2.7 million jobs annually. So it's starting to be, you know, it's still very small by marketplace standards. You know, it's tiny compared to eBay. I mean, it's the size of, you know, eBay Belgium, basically. There's nothing wrong with Belgium. I'm sorry, I'm French, so I hope I'm not insulting the Belgians in the room. Apologies. But, you know, by really big marketplace standards, it's really small. But it is starting to have an impact. You know, at any point in time, there's about 100,000 people who make all or most of their income on the platform. So this is starting to be pretty sizable. And you know, in terms of skills, you know, the other thing that people often ask is, what can you do on the platform? And essentially, the answer is anything that doesn't require the person to be physically present. So if you're looking for, you know, a waitress to come to your restaurant tomorrow, that's not what we do. But anything you do remotely, whether it's, you know, obviously software development is how we got started. So, you know, any kind of programming jobs, but also design, translation, writing, customer support, sales, just about anything you can do, you know, on a mobile device or on a PC. So this is, you know, essentially what we've been doing traditionally for the last 10 years or so, we put in touch clients on one side with freelancers on the other side. We essentially have two ways of operating. One, which is what we call the public cloud, which is what everybody knows. You go to odesk.com or elance.com, and everybody can post jobs, everybody can apply to jobs, and then we curate a little bit to decide who actually gets hired. There's more recently something we've introduced here called the private talent clouds, and this came from a growing number of enterprise companies telling us, hey, we really love what you guys do, but we can't possibly mix with the open community. We need to have our own private marketplace. And we help these companies go through compliance steps. So if you want to only onboard people that have been curated, like the people that have writing skills and you're proud of actually showing them to your users, we're going to go through compliance steps, if you need to do background checks on people, if you need them to sign NDAs, if you need them to secure their machines, all of that stuff. And then we hide them in a user experience that looks the same as the general user experience, but it's designed for just you as a company. So this, I think, if you came back to John's framework of the 4 levels of platforms, I'd say this is a level 3 mobilization platform, right? You as a client hire one or multiple freelancers, and you mobilize them towards a common goal, and people kind of self-assemble, get work done, and the output of this is you pay them, and they deliver something for you. What we found, though, over the last few years is 2 things have happened. One is, when we were really small, we looked at the world and we said, wow, this is a really big opportunity. We don't have enough engineers to do all the stuff we want to do. There's so many use cases out there, but we're going to grow so fast that eventually we'll be able to do everything for everybody. And it turns out that the more we grew, the less that was true. And really, the number of use cases, if you think of a really big enterprise company that wants to have thousands of people on the platform compared to a startup who wants to have a couple of people, maybe part-time. And you think about people who want to build an entire call center through the platform versus people who want to translate books in a gazillion languages in real time. These are just different needs, and we can't be everything to everybody in a specialized way. We can offer kind of the horizontal platform, the piece that everybody needs, but delivering all of the vertical experiences is extremely hard. So I think that was one realization, is we can't be everything to everybody. The second thing is we've seen more and more companies trying to be the Odesk or the Elance of something, back to that being the Airbnb of something. And and all of them are good ideas. I mean, you see some of the initiatives that people have done, and you look at this and you're like, wow, I wish we were doing this too, because it's really cool. And yet at the same time, very few of them are successful, because the little hidden secret of platforms is they take forever to scale. And they're incredibly capital intensive. There's a reason why your company's been around for 10 years, and Elance has been around for 15 years. I mean, and eBay, frankly, took forever to start too. Getting that spin wheel, the network effect is beautiful once it's there, but you need to get buyers to get sellers, you need to get sellers to get buyers, and that thing at the beginning is, anybody who's tried to do an early stage marketplace knows that it's incredibly complicated. And so on one side, you have all of these companies that have great ideas, that do things that we don't have the bandwidth to do, and they seem to be incredibly complementary to what we would do. On the other side, they're going to be struggling because it's so hard to build the marketplace. And that was completely uncalled for, but you cited this example of we're going to build our own talent cloud, and that's great, and you can totally do it on your own if you want to. But typically, what we have ended up doing is opening up the platform, which is what I'm going to talk about here. And that was, I think, your question, Sam, about do you really want to build it all yourself? And I think the answer is we tried, and we realized we weren't going to be successful, so now we're letting other people do it. Which doesn't mean we don't continue to invest. I mean, we still invest in the core marketplace, but more and more you'll see us opening up different parts of the infrastructure and making it available to other companies who can build on top of it. And so here's one type of ways we've opened up. So as I said, traditionally, clients engage directly with us. So small, medium-sized businesses, all the way to enterprises, engage directly with us. They contract with us, and we offer them our service. And what we've realized is that is probably the first place where we don't deliver a good enough service to exactly everybody in the food chain. And so we've opened it up to third-party providers who go after a certain niche and do it in a way that is extremely compelling, and frankly more compelling than we would do it on our own. And now, frankly, to be honest, this is one of the scariest things you can do as a business, and partly thanks to where did you go? Well, so there's a lot of literature in the marketplace industry right now that says because it's so hard to start a new marketplace, the best way you can do it is by cannibalizing somebody else's marketplace, right? And Airbnb started by stealing listings from Craigslist, as we all know, and now it's a well-known fact in the industry. Now we are the incumbent here, right? And we stand to lose a lot by opening up. But I think it's the right decision. At the end of the day, it's the case for cannibalize yourself. If you don't, somebody else will do it for you. We are taking a risk by doing this. We do think that generally people are basically good, and people are not out there to try to destroy us. And as such, we've made it available for just about any third-party provider to access our APIs and essentially access our talent and access all of the functionality that you get through Elance and Odesk, invoicing, contracting, payments, and all that stuff. So to give you some examples of cool creative things that people do, this is actually a very small company, and what they've figured out is people have thousands and thousands of pictures on their PCs, and we all procrastinate around this stuff. We know we want to curate our pictures. We know we want to enhance them. And yes, one day when we're less busy, we're going to get around to it. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's been 6 or 7 years I've been saying this. I've got tens of thousands of pictures of family and kids, and I never get around to it. And so the idea of this company is to say, look, you can't do this stuff automatically. The machines are not yet smart enough, and you'd have to train them a lot anyway to discover that, this is your kid, this is not your kid, and you really care mostly about your kid. And that picture looks good, but it could look even better if you enhanced it. And so what these guys have built on top of Odesk is essentially a curated pool of freelancers on one side, people who work full-time on the Odesk platform, and all they do, and they've become really, really good at it, and they have really good tools for it, but all they do all day long is to create people's pictures. So you send your 10,000 pictures to those guys, and they come back and they send you the few hundred that are really good, and they've professionally enhanced them, and you can even put them on a mug if you want to, or whatever it is that makes you happy. But essentially, it's the stuff that, talking about the human API, there are things that machines can't do yet that humans are really good at. And to the extent that you as a client, you're willing to pay for the service, there are people out there that are willing to do this for a living. So that's one example of something really cool. I wish I had the idea myself, but frankly, even if I had, we just don't have the bandwidth to do it internally. It is pretty niche. I mean, when you do $1 billion of transactions a year and you grow at X%, in order for the new idea to make an impact, it needs to be pretty big. And this is it would have been probably too low on our priority list, even if we had decided to build it ourselves. Another example of something really cool that has been done on top of Elance and Odesk recently is this company called ZipTask. And what they're going after is saying, look, as this kind of stuff becomes more mainstream, the early adopters of Elance and Odesk were technologists, probably people like you who know what they're doing, can know how to hire people online, have management experience, know how to break a task into smaller tasks, get things done. What you find is there's a lot of average-sized businesses that have similar needs as what you might have had, but they don't have the know-how to do it. And so they really need to get somebody to help them do it. And so what ZipTask has done is essentially build an entire project management layer on top of Elance and Odesk, and they essentially staff a project manager for you. So you're going to get a phone call from somebody who essentially interviews you and say, hey, Joe, what are you trying to achieve? And they're going to document everything for you. They're going to break it down into smaller pieces. They're going to be giving you a budget for it. They're going to be hiring people through the platform. They're going to give you status updates. And at the end, it's going to cost you significantly more money than if you had done it yourself. But given that you didn't know how to do it yourself, you're going to get a much better outcome. Right? So same thing, seems like a trivial idea. Why on earth are we not doing it? And the answer is we actually had that on the roadmap. And I think we would have probably done it in 3 or 4 years. But the world can't wait, and I'm really glad that somebody else did it for us, and these guys seem to be pretty successful at it. Here's another example. This is a company that was based in Eastern Europe, but they've just recently moved to the East Coast. And back to your question about Mechanical Turks. Traditionally, so the Mechanical Turk is other than being a computer science problem, it's also a product by Amazon. And it's a product that basically allows a company to post large number of really small tasks, typically coming straight from a database, and getting human beings to complete those tasks and submit back the results. So one example of things like this is, moderate my website. People are posting, hundreds of thousands of images a day. I need to know which ones are not conforming to my, user agreement. If there's any kind of nudity or whatever. And one of the problems with those platforms is quality tends to be problematic. Getting humans to agree on whether this represents nudity or not is not a trivial problem. And one of the challenges that most of these platforms have is the fact that you can't choose the workers who work for you in the cloud. And so this company here is basically building a Mechanical Turk on top of Elance and Odesk. And so essentially, you hire the people, like you as the client, you decide who are the people that know writing, who are the people that know how to do copy editing, who are the people that, whatever. And then you operate just like you would with Mechanical Turk, which is you submit big lists of tasks to get done, you get big lists of submission back, and you can evaluate workers based on the quality of their work, the productivity of their work, and then decide who's good enough and should stay with you, who's not good enough. You can staff more people, you can downsize if you need to downsize, all of that stuff. So same thing, like very clear logical application of what we do. It's actually a lot of work, and I think even though that's actually a pretty big market, and it's probably a pretty big opportunity, it's something that is so complex and so far away from the core of what we do that I don't think we would have built it ourselves. But we built the APIs so that them and there's 4 or 5 other companies that do the same thing could compete against each other and figure out how to win this market. So that's on the client side. There's a similar story on the talent side. And the story here is there are other providers, some of which are also marketplaces themselves, who have talent, and what they're missing is a source of jobs. And so they're connecting to us, using the same open APIs to get the list of jobs, apply to jobs that they're interested in, get the jobs, the offers, accept the offers, and then get a list of tasks that need to get done, submit the list of tasks back, all of this in a completely automated way. And then, of course, there's humans on their side that actually do the work, and that's the value they deliver. And to give you one example of this, there's a company based in Japan, and there's also one in the US that does roughly the same thing, that provides translation services. And they have a very large list of really good translators, including in languages where we traditionally haven't been really strong. Korean, as an example, is a country where we don't have a huge amount of presence, and yet US companies are typically very interested in translating their material in Korean. And so the way they connect into the platform is they essentially grab every job that relates to Korea, and then they automatically staff one of their linguists on it, and then by the same process, quality is assessed, they get paid, all of that good stuff. And then the third type of open applications that we've allowed on the platform recently is what we call embedded applications. And this is, frankly, still emerging, and we are nowhere near where we need to be. But the idea here is, even if you're a user of Elance or of Odesk, there are additional tools that you might want to use that traditionally weren't embedded in the platform. And if you look at the most obvious ones, most of our users will chat over Skype, and they'll call each other over Google Hangouts, and they'll collaborate using Basecamp, and they'll file issues using Jira, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They'll have source control using GitHub, and none of these things are integrated, and it's really painful. When you hire somebody, you need to create an account for them on the 20 different tools that you use. And by the way, they're not using the same tools that you're using, so then you need to train them on it, which is a real pain. And it's painful enough when you hire employees full-time for a long time, but if these tend to be shorter projects where you might work with that freelancer for a couple of weeks at a time, then it's even more painful. And frankly, the same is true on the freelancer side. We tend to think more about the client side when we're based here in the US, but when you go talk to some of the freelancers who tend to be more outside of the US, they have the same issues. They have their own tools that they'd like their clients to use, and it would be so much easier for them if every client was using the same tool, because otherwise they go from project to project, and every time they lose a couple of days of work just getting provisioned and trained and all that stuff. And so the idea here is to allow some of the existing third-party services to be embedded within the Elance and Odesk platforms, and ideally even open up the innovation to new startups who might have, the best new way of collaborating with a remote freelancer, things that, nobody has thought of before, and we either haven't thought of either, or we just don't have the bandwidth to do it. And as I said, this is still a little bit nascent, but to give you examples of companies that have done this with us, JoinMe is a video conferencing system. JoinMe is a phone and screen sharing communication system. Talkbox is a video conferencing system. And then we have other tools like CloudForge, which is more of a source control repository, bug tracking type of system. And there's probably going to be a lot more coming here. The idea, again, being that we can provide the horizontal tools that work for everybody. Frankly, like being able to chat and email each other is something that everybody needs. Being able to track tasks is something that everybody needs. But after that, things become pretty quickly fairly niche. Like tools for linguists, you need to have a tool that has a translation memory and a tool that does, blah, 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 and I don't even know what it is. And frankly, like there's no way we could know everything about every single vertical. But there are providers out there that have the tools already and would benefit from the kind of audience that we have. And just connecting the APIs together makes a ton of sense. So this has been said before, so maybe I'm kind of repeating what, that's the problem when you show up at 2 p.m. But open platforms always win. And I think that's the bottom line of this is we're taking a little bit of a risk by doing this, but I think in the long run, we're taking an even bigger risk by not doing it. And, you remember the days of AOL and how, AOL was the internet for the longest time, and they missed the boat by remaining closed when everybody else was opening up. And you look at console gaming, which I realize that I'm just before a panel about gaming, so I'm not going to pretend that I know anything about the gaming industry, but it does seem like console gaming is becoming a really, really tough business, and probably partly because of the online games have appeared. eBay, which I actually happen to know, having spent about 7 years there, in many ways, eBay created Google. Like eBay wanted to keep their sellers to themselves, wanted to make sure that sellers would not create their own website and their own e-commerce platform. And ultimately, Google made it much more cost-effective to buy ads at a much lower percentage of the sales. And progressively, as a seller, if you became big enough, you realize, oh my God, eBay is taking 18% of my business. If I do this through Google, I can get away with 5 or 6% of my business. And when you're tiny, the difference doesn't make sense. But when you get big enough, it does make a ton of sense. And I guess the last thing I would say is, this is a really, really big space, and we're really, really tiny in that space. People tend to define, Elance and Odesk as being the dominant player in a tiny little industry, which is so far from the truth, right? I mean, the industry that we play in is staffing and outsourcing, and I think we've just made it to the list of the top 50 biggest, staffing companies in the world, but I don't even remember where we rank, but we're pretty low on the list. And so I think the point here is the space is extremely big, and I don't think we're going to be successful if we try to go at it on our own. I think it's an ecosystem play. It's a play where there's a ton of other companies that are interested in what we do, whether it's more on the contract management side, on the payment side, on the collaboration side, or just opening up the marketplace to other providers. And I think together we're going to make a big dance in an industry that frankly hasn't changed much in the last 20 or 30 years. So I think that's pretty much all I had. Questions?
Stephane, thank you. I was actually fascinated by this because I've used Odesk and followed what you guys have been doing, and even I was not aware of some of the nested businesses on top of Odesk. I mean, if Amazon's offering cloud services, you seem to be offering cloud labor complete with middle management. I'm fascinated by these examples of Chrome and ZipTask in particular. How do you manage the pricing for these mid-tier, middle management on top of your services? And also, how do you manage them, prevent them from, once they've established their own brand and their own labor force, what's to keep them from taking business off platform?
Right.
So how do you manage the pricing and how do you keep the business on platform?
So the second one is, I think, what I was referring to when I said, it's a scary move for a company. The pricing right now, we've made it pretty simple, which is they pay the same price as everybody else, and then they mark up to their clients. And to the extent that there's a need for us to be involved in the markup, we can do it. We have the technology to say, the regular pricing is 10%, but because you're going through ZipTask, you pay another 20%, or they can invoice the customers themselves, whichever way they want. It typically wouldn't make sense. Like if we discounted the pricing for them, then we'd be inviting, particularly wrong behaviors. And if we increased it, then we would be discouraging them from doing it in the first place. So it seems like the natural, logical price for it is to keep the price the same. In terms of, what can you do to prevent people from essentially poaching talent or poaching clients? If people do it in a very aggressive way, there's a lot of numbers that end up showing up wrong. I mean, to give you an example, a client that posts 100 jobs and interviews 100 people, but never makes a hire, there's probably something a little bit fishy, right? So if you do it in a very, and same thing on the freelance side, right? So if people are trying to be too outrageous about it, it's relatively easy to tell. It's obviously, very clear in our user agreement that essentially you can poach people off of the platform if you want to. You just have to pay a fee for it, which is pretty typical of what a traditional consulting firm or staffing firm would be, which is, you can hire employees if you want to. They're not our employees in our case, but the traditional equivalent would be you can poach our employees. However, here's the fee that you have to pay. And so if you want to do it officially, there's a clause. We can make it happen. There's no problem. If you're trying to do it unofficially, then you'd better be smart about it, because otherwise we'll find you, and then it doesn't happen really well. I think the real answer, though, is this is not an equilibrium play. It's not like you could poach once and then get away with it forever, right? Typically, you're growing as a business. Some of the workers that work for you right now are not going to be working for you next year because, they moved on or whatever. So you're going to have to come back to the well. And unless you want to try to, make yourself an enemy of the well, you don't really want to do that. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I don't think it's necessarily in people's best interest either to do that.
I'm very interested in the adaptivity and competitive issues here, because you're changing fundamentally the economics of the business you choose to participate in. So here you are, you're Walmart. You set up Walmart.com to begin to deal with Amazon after your deal with Amazon falls apart. Why isn't there a Manpower.com and Attico.com? Why don't people look at you approaching $1 billion and saying, we need to cherry pick and adapt our own human network and our own qualifying and credentialing business to prevent you from moving up from number 50 to number 10 in the market? So since you worked at a more established company like eBay, what have you learned about what's easy or difficult to emulate or replicate for the incumbents who you confront?
Sure. So obviously I can't comment about what they might or might not be thinking and might or might not be doing. But to answer your question about how does a big company deal with this stuff, I think there's two challenges when you're a big company. One is if you're growing still at, let's say your Manpower, you do $10 billion of revenue, growing at 10% year on year. That means you need to add 1 billion next year. 1 billion is what we do, right? So you need to get the full size of Elance and Odesk within a year for this to be useful, right? And that's really hard to do. And so launching new products when you're a big company, if you're still growing relatively fast, is a difficult story to tell when you could still marginally improve your existing business by, there's always operational efficiencies, always ways to turn the dials a little bit more. And typically, at least in the short term, that generates a lot more revenue than trying to launch something new. I think that's one reason. Second reason is the typical, innovator's dilemma against disruption, right? We charge 10%. Most of the industry out there charges 50%, right? And frankly, has the cost structure that forces them to charge 50%. And would you cannibalize yourself against, some tiny little startup that is 10 times smaller than you, and for all you know, may not be that successful. Like, maybe they're going to continue to grow, maybe they're going to stall at some point. Why on earth would you take the risk to cannibalize your existing, very stable, very successful business? I mean, as a CEO of a publicly traded company, that is a very hard decision to make, right? Now, I'm not stating specifically for them. I have no idea what they're thinking or not thinking, but if I were the CEO of a really big company competing against, a disruptor, that's typically some of the issues that people have to run into. I don't think it's particular to Odesk coming into the staffing industry. I think your eBay competing against traditional auction houses, your Amazon competing against traditional retailers, frankly your NSSD hard drive provider competing against the current SAN storage providers. I think everybody runs into the same issues, which is react before it's too late, but don't react too early, because if you do it too early, you're really killing yourself for something that may not actually ever come up to fruition.
Stephane, if I could just reinforce that, we hire people away from legacy competitors all the time. What we hear is it's easy for the chairman of the board to go out and say, we're going to remake ourselves in the new economic model. Changing the culture and the expectations of your sales force and how they're used to getting compensated is tremendously difficult, and the cultural inertia on that is huge. And I'm just wondering, do you get that kind of competitive intelligence by hiring people away from competitors so you can find out what the contradictions are between their external positioning and their internal culture?
So we haven't traditionally, and I think that may change a little bit over time. Traditionally, these businesses have grown without sales. Now, our salespeople would hate me if I said, actually, I guess I am saying it publicly, but until a couple, okay, tweet it, go for it. I'm going to get killed when I come back. This is going to be great. But, until a couple of years ago, we didn't even have a sales team. So I think the people we might want to hire from, competitors would probably be in the area of sales and account management. These were traditionally pure online businesses. We're just getting to be at the point where, if you're trying to sell to a Fortune 500 company, hoping that they're going to click on a Google ad and sign themselves up, and that suddenly 10,000 people internally within the company will know about the product and be using it, is just not going to happen. It has happened to us in the past, but partly because those really big companies happened to be Silicon Valley-based companies where every employee knew who we were anyway. And so the knowledge was kind of diffused within the company just from the fact that people knew about it as individuals. It's not super scalable if you want to try to go after more traditional, Fortune 500 companies. So I think we're going to have to go into, slightly more traditional selling techniques as well.
Is that a speculation about something you might do, or a pre-announcement about something you're about to do?
About poaching from competitors. So I'm not in sales. So I'm not even speculating. I have no idea.
I think we're just out of time.
There you go. Good answer.